All right. Welcome everybody to a special session of the Southern Fried DNN User Group. We are thrilled here today to have Andy Tryba and DNN Corp to do an introduction interview. This is some of our first opportunities to share questions with the new head of DNN Corp, and we're quite eager. We've had a lot of community involvement with people coming out of the woodwork, some folks that we haven't heard from in a while, some folks that we hear from every week. Everybody eager with questions and excited about this this change of guard, and excited for the future and what this can mean. So Andy, thank you very much for joining us here today. Obviously, we also have in the room Joe Brinkman. Here on our side, myself, Ryan Moore, David Poindexter, and Clint Patterson. We also have Grant Eric here, and he's in the room with us. What we're going to do today is an interview format, Southern Fried meeting. So everybody who's here online with us, we're up to almost 60 participants at this point. Please give us your questions in the chat session. We will be watching those. Clint and David will be bringing those in and interspersing them in where appropriate, and we'll also get to them at the end of the interview as well. But just to cut down on the volume, we're going to do it interview style for this session. To begin with, I'd like to pass it over to Clint for just a moment, in that we do have some new eyes. I'm sure that most folks know about the Southern Fried User Group, but we would like to just take a moment to talk a little bit about our format and what we do here every month. Clint?
All right, appreciate it, Ryan. So yeah, we just wanted to take a minute and kind of introduce Southern Fried DNN User Group. Most everybody on the call here knows about us, but we host a monthly DNN meeting. It's the third Thursday of every month, and we live stream the meetings. We post replays. So Ryan's bringing up the website here. So if you ever wonder what we've got coming up or what's happened in the past, you can go to southernfrieddnn.com and see all of our meeting recaps and replays. And so we just want to extend the invite to everybody to join us every month. I think we are one of the last few, if not the only, last standing user group here. And so we really, want to create some energy and momentum here. And go ahead and you click to the Meetup page. You'll notice we do have our meetings listed on Meetup. So that means you can obviously register to come to the meetings. You'll be notified when new content comes out. And also there's a contribute or a chip-in button on the left-hand side, which we recently had our third contribution from Mr. Dennis Shaw. We appreciate that, Dennis. But if you like the content that we create, if our meetings or any of the videos, replays that we post have helped you, feel free to click the chip-in button here and help us keep this thing going. So, I'm one of our user group leaders, wearing my DNN shirt here. You see that, Joe Brinkman? And that's right. Pay attention.
Love it.
And,
love it. Love it.
But yeah, so the monthly meetings, they take a lot of organization. I'd like to kind of promote Ryan Moore, More Creative, and David Poindexter with Envision Native. So, it takes a lot of time and energy to plan our meetings, and so I'd like to, give those guys kudos or a round of applause. And again, we just wanted to, remind everybody here in the community that we do have monthly meetings, and we'd love for you all to attend and present, and just keep the community moving forward. So that's it for me, Ryan.
All right. Clicking over to a couple of things, we're going to cut over to video in just a moment and really get into our interview portion here, but this all kicked off last week as we finished up our weekly meeting on Thursday, and after that, just shortly after, we were able to hear this news come out of the new chapter for DNN, and we got introduced to the acquisition by ESW Capital. We got to hear and start to begin Googling and finding out everything we could about Andy, and we extended an invitation to have him come out and talk with us next month for our next meeting. And it couldn't wait. Enough conversation was going on with all of the other folks that we talk with just on our own daily and from the user group that the question was asked pretty quickly, could we do one sooner? So thank you very much, Andy, for for joining us here impromptu and quickly. We thoroughly appreciate that. We sent out a list of questions earlier where we kind of gathered the thoughts and ideas of a lot of folks, and we're not going to go through these necessarily one at a time and do all of them, but we do have a lot of interesting questions and a lot of interesting things to ask you about and to find out. So at this point, I'm going to, let's see, pause or stop the sharing, and that gets me video? No.
No,
this.
you just stop sharing.
Yes. All right. Here we go. Andy, welcome and thank you to the Southern Fried DNN user group. Thank you for joining us here today.
I'm happy to be here. Happy to be part of the greater DNN family as a whole, not only the corporate side, but the open source community. And certainly happy to join any meetup with a creative name like you guys. It's got to be one of the best names I've ever seen. So.
All right. Well, we have had a user group. A conference here that started out as the Southern Fried event, but that day of DNN turned into our user group name pretty quickly. Well,
nice.
Andy, we've got a lot of questions to come through. One of the first questions I was asking was how we're pronouncing your last name, and it is Tryba. That's correct? I'm saying that right?
Yeah, you got it.
Right.
Feel free to call me whatever you want. That's I over the years I've gone by Tryba. Proper pronunciation is Tryba, but I'm happy to go by whatever.
All right. Well, we're just going to jump right into some of the personal interest questions so we can learn a little bit more about you. My good friend Adderson has an idea. He'll ask people what their one big thing is, and I'd like to start off with that. The idea is there's something that you're passionate about, something that gets you out of bed every morning, and it's the thing that you focus on, and when you do, you're alive doing that. So what's your one big thing?
Sure. Well, I would say that my one big thing, if I had to choose one, is that I'm a technology optimist, right? When you think about and you ask people if you had this magic time machine and you can go back in any era of time, and when would it be? And you get all kinds of creative answers. Or I'd go to medieval times, or go meet interesting people like Abraham Lincoln, or whatever else it may be. But in reality, when you start double clicking into it a little bit further, you start saying, I don't even know if I'd want to go back 10 years. Right? I mean, you want to go. You want to go back to like dial-up modems. You want that. You want to go back before you had. iPhones and iPads and what have you, right? So I look at what technology has done to humanity as a whole and all of our lives, enabling even things like this to occur, right? Where this would have been unthinkable 20 years ago for us to be sitting down over video here, having a little chat and what have you. So I think of what technology does to humanity as a whole, and I'm incredibly bullish. So when I think about my one thing, I think about how technology, whether that be cloud-related technology, whether it be communication-related technology, how that actually impacts humanity, and then how do we help kind of collectively work together to go and make that progress? Because I do believe that we actually do have to work together to go and make that happen, and that's actually one of the reasons why I kind of love the whole open source movement.
That's maybe a good segue to hear about some of the past things you've put together. The Ride Austin is the first thing that I think of there, that wouldn't have been possible before, and thinking of it as a technology optimist, you put together something pretty exciting there very quickly.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. So I guess if I were to just recap the kind of just the 5-second version of the career. So I engineering by schooling, I guess, and I was 14 years at Intel, and my roles at Intel ranged from kind of engineering to the last role that I was in. It was kind of the future of work, because Intel is kind of an interesting company where you actually have a 5-year planning cycle, so you have to dig a big hole in the ground, throw about $10 billion into it, and 5 years later, hopefully you're right, because that's how long it takes to make the fabs and what have you. So on my team, I had kind of your typical PhDs of any kind of buzzword you can think of, right? AR, VR, Internet of Things, blah blah blah, right? But it was really amazing to kind of think about trends as a whole, and kind of think about that passion of mine of the technology and how that can kind of help humanity as a whole. Also at Intel, I started my first company on the medical startup side of the world. It was a chronic disease management company, and then ended up selling that to a player actually in Florida. I left there to kind of go into the White House for a year, where we were working on how you graduate more engineers at a U.S. university system. And then after that, I started Crossover, which is a cloud team-based hiring model where we kind of find the best people from around the world and assemble them into teams. And then started Ride Austin, as you mentioned, which is actually a nonprofit version of rideshare like Uber and Lyft. And I get a bit of a side there. So Uber and Lyft, they got into a fight with the city of Austin, like they do in a lot of other cities around the world. And then they picked up their toys and went home, and that left about 10,000 drivers that were immediately out of some or all of their employment. So we kind of started up as a nonprofit to help those people out, but to also help out the local charities.
The remarkable part for me is that from what I read, that was a 4-week turnaround.
It was actually. So because all those, those 10,000 drivers were out of some or all their income, and I don't care who you are. If you lose some or all your income instantaneously, you're going to be put in a bad situation. So we knew that. So we basically stayed up all night for 4 weeks doing all the coding, because we didn't know how much there was to do until you actually get into it, just like anything else, right? So driver app, rider apps, Android, iOS, a Java-based backend, AWS, the whole 9 yards. So we got that up and going in 4 weeks, which is great. And then we grew to be number one in Austin. Actually, we've done about 2 million rides or so over the last year, and we were able to, because it's a nonprofit, we also contribute to local charities. So we've been able to contribute about $250,000 to local charities. But I think most relevant to this discussion is that we also have this philosophy of open data, where we actually, the rideshare industry is incredibly closed with all of their data, and actually Uber and Lyft sue cities for publishing any of that. And we do the exact opposite, is that we publish everything, and we work with local researchers, we work with the local government and others to do all of our breakdowns of all of the rides and the costs and the whole 9 yards. Because I'm a passionate believer, again, that you have to be able to collaborate in order for us to get to autonomous vehicles or some of these other mobility services. So that open data philosophy was a big passion of mine, and now Uber and Lyft are back, so they are doing a good job of leveraging their $12 billion in cash to buy market share back, but we're hanging in there. So interesting.
If nothing else, you showed them what they should have been doing in the beginning, which was not arguing fiercely and playing ball.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's one of those where I understand, business and politics, unfortunately, don't go hand in hand all the time. But I'm also a policy optimist, in that I do actually believe in that intersection between policy and the public and the private sector. And I believe that there's tremendous power in that intersection. So it's unfortunate when you see companies fight against that.
Let's jump right into the questions of the day. You're coming in here new. We're getting used to knowing who you are and learning the things that you're going to be directing and where you're going to take things. So far, ESW Capital, we haven't heard a lot about. Can you tell us a little bit about ESW Capital and who they are and what they look like?
Sure. Yeah. So ESW Capital is, I think, a little bit of a unique animal in the private equity space, in that it's a single owner private equity, meaning that there's not rounds, right? You don't have to go and raise funds, do debt, and then go and try to create some exits to then go pay back your limited partners. I think that one of the advantages that enables us to do in the ESW Capital side of the world is actually find perhaps some mature companies that have been around for some time, and then rejuvenate and bring additional life into the equation, and then run it for the long haul. right? Where we're not looking for the quick unicorn turnaround, right? We're like, great, how do we invest in companies that we believe that are going to be around for a long time, that perhaps have been around for a long time and have a great user base like y'all, or great customers, or both, and then be able to then run that type of business forever.
Do you feel like that's a good outline of the feeling of ESW Capital towards this acquisition of DNN Corporate, that it is a mature organization that's been around for a while, and that you're looking to rejuvenate, reinvigorate, and help manage for the long haul?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I do believe. I mean, if you look at the .NET new community as a whole, of course, been around now for whatever 14 years now, is it, right? And obviously, when you look at the early days of excitement versus now, there's obviously a large, I would call, dormant population that I think would be great to bring back into the fold. Right. I mean, the whole notion of digital content management and ensuring that companies leverage that even more is even more important now than perhaps was in 2004, 2005, 2006. So that need isn't going away anytime soon, and it excites me that there's tons of people that are passionate about this space. That let's go do some interesting things. There's no reason why we can't rejuvenate that and kind of make it fresh and relevant to all of the folks that need that type of solution.
Well, from a business strategy standpoint, let's kind of talk about that for just a moment. Obviously, with your business background and the position that you're now here with ESW Capital, you're helping structure DNN. And ultimately are answering to an investment where they're going to want return on investment. And there's a lot that needs to be balanced here between DNN Corporate, between Evoke, between paid editions, between services, between community. Is it too early? Have you already started to form a business plan? Do you have an outline of what you're looking to achieve and how you're going to meet those goals of return on investment?
Sure. Yeah, I guess, when you look at the open source community as a whole, there's obviously good examples and bad examples out there on the commercialization elements of it versus, kind of the broader copyleft models. But I don't actually believe that they have to have attention. I do believe that the asset of the community can coexist with the commercial elements of it, and we're actually looking to make it even perhaps obviously we have to listen to the community as a whole to make sure that we're focusing in the right direction. But my view is that there's no reason why we can't actually help the community as a whole. Sell additional plugins and what have you that gets done. There's no reason why we can't help offer advanced levels of support to community customers. There's no reason why we can't make the storefronts even easier to use for our customers to bring in some of the community in. So I believe these are all ways that we can work together and coexist, but yet also drive growth. Right? I'm here, and we bought this company because we do believe that we can drive growth. But I believe that it's amplified when you have this great, robust community that also is interested, engaged, and have relevant solutions to bring to customers.
You kind of mentioned a we there, and one of the things that I'm unaware of is how long you've been with ESW Capital. How did they find you originally? How did you learn about DNN? What were some of your first impressions there as you were getting connected?
Yeah, sure. So the head of ESW Capital is a good buddy of mine that I've known for the better part of 15 years, a gentleman by the name of... And when I started Crossover, Joe and I kind of chatted a bit, and he's actually one of my biggest investors in Crossover. And he was basically like, hey, why don't you grow Crossover, and you can use all the ESW Capital companies as test beds because certainly, like all startups, there's lots to learn, and although we've been doing it now for years, there's still lots to learn. So that's kind of how we started working, and then Joe and I also did Write Austin together. He's a co-founder with Write Austin. So we've been doing a lot of things over the past years here, and then it was recently, both with the Engine Yard acquisition as well as the DNN acquisition, where Joe had asked me to say, hey, listen, you're kind of the growth guy. Why don't we also apply that in this other area, more in my classic PE space as part of ESW Capital, and that's kind of how this all came about.
Well, that kind of leads me to then ask about some of your background there in that coding and development side. There was a Ruby on Rails mention, but I didn't see an ASP.NET mention. So how was DNN chosen, or how did you find DNN when you first ran across it?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm a long-time Wintel guy, right? I mean, 14 years at Intel. I spent many moons up in Redmond and what have you. So certainly, familiar with the Microsoft community as a whole. I think that Satya has actually done a pretty good job of transitioning the company away from the PC space. Actually, arguably even better than Intel has done, transitioning away from the PC space into cloud services and others. So I'm a big believer that the Microsoft ecosystem will actually continue to grow and go up into the right. So I'm super bullish, ASP.NET and Azure and other things like that. And then when we were looking around at companies, I was basically given a blank slate, right? Where it's like, hey, go find companies that you think that you can grow. And I was looking for companies like DNN that, again, have a strong history, strong user base that perhaps is in a different position now than a few years back. That we believe that the space is still relevant. That we can then go and become laser focused, but then drive that growth.
Yeah, things where you see a potential for growth or for building on, and you saw some of that potential here in DNN as you were describing there. Anything specific that you saw that you thought can grow and that you're looking forward to focusing on?
Yeah, I mean, so all the businesses that I'm involved in are somehow related to the cloud, right? Where whether you're talking about compute in the cloud, whether you're talking about software in the cloud, whether you're talking about some type of how you communicate to your customers. So I do believe that in all scenarios, digital content becomes more and more important. In the interplay between apps, websites, mobile, all that becomes super important, as well as structured content. So I love all of those spaces, and I think that finding easy ways to be able to give that to customers is the key in my mind. You look at the what Apple has done phenomenally well is make things super easy to use, and now there's an expectation that that's basically the way that it needs to be. I mean, it's funny. You can hand a kid, an iPad, a 2-year-old, and they're swiping away, and the interface is that good where literally that they can do that. So I think that that is basically the bar, and the Microsoft products historically haven't actually been at that bar. Right, but I believe that that's the type of goal that we have to set. Where when we talk about the usability of the CMS solutions here, whether you're talking about the IT guy, because the IT guy he's under tons of strain, right? He's got the marketing folks of different divisions saying I want this or I want this marketing automation tool, and whatever else. So he's stuck in this tough spot of trying to figure out what solution to offer and and what have you. And he certainly doesn't want to go update web pages because the marketing guy chose a different shade of pink to use, right? So finding super easy ways to let that IT guy go free and enable to have this kind of extensible plugin model. And by the way, it's on the .NET framework. And by the way, there's this great open source community behind it. I think all of those things end up being a great opportunity.
Are there some things that you have earmarked as things that you want to try and accomplish here in your in your first 100 days of being here at the helm, things that you're either focusing on or things that you want to try and achieve or make different?
Yeah, as long as we avoid the comparisons to the presidential first 100 days and what have you, so we'll keep that aside. But
it's the intent of the idea. So first things first.
Exactly.
What's first on your list?
Yeah, so number one on the list is actually I want to get together with as many customers as humanly possible. So I've had Naveen introduce me to our top 20 customers because I do want to hear from them. What's working, but more importantly, what isn't working, right? It's always easy to talk about rainbows and butterflies and what have you, but it's actually let's talk about the stuff that isn't working, so we can go work on those. So that's the number one thing that I'm working on. Number two is to engage with y'all, where I think the open source community and the community as a whole, just not just the open source, but the partner community and the user groups and what have you. I think that it's such an important part of the growth strategy moving forward that I wanted to listen to you guys. I know that this is a short chat here, but on an ongoing basis, I'd love to get in the room with y'all and whiteboard and figure out what makes sense. I'm actually Sean Walker and I are actually having dinner I think next week. Yeah. So I'll get a little bit more of a perspective from him also on kind of the community as a whole. So that's kind of number two on the list, and then number three on the list is really kind of looking at our simplification story, right? Simplification in the product, simplification in the messaging, and really kind of aligning those to be a specific bowling pin like structure. I'm a big fan of Jeffrey Moore's crossing the chasm mentality, where I do believe that it's all about building these bowling pins and then stacking them next to each other, and that's how you cross the chasm versus trying to jump horizontally across the whole thing. So that's kind of the focus area in the first 30 days, really, and then if we can accomplish that in 30 days, then it'd be great. Obviously, it's going to be continuous, but that's the first 30 days.
Well, you did mention connecting with the community, so I need to ask a couple of questions there. There have been, at least in the last few years, 2 or 3 very well-attended, popular community-run events created by the community and for the community. Here in the States, we have DNN Con and DNN Summit that have run. DNN Summit is coming up in February. Then we also have DNN Connect out across the pond. So first question that I've already had a couple times here in the chat is, are we going to see you out at DNN Summit in February?
Absolutely.
All right.
And I'd say 2 things about that. One is that it feels like a great way to meet a ton of the community and get that feedback as we were talking about. And I do want to talk to as many people as possible to understand what's worked well with the community in the past and what hasn't, right? I mean, I've watched a bunch of stuff, videos online, interviews and other things with the community. I've read some of the open source pages on, talks of forking and things like that. So I know it hasn't always been rosy, and that's great. So let's address them. Let's not, try to wash them under. Let's talk about them. Like, great, what worked, what didn't work, and I feel like those types of events are great for that. A, and then 2, I want to amplify those, right? I mean, if we're going to drive excitement in the community, like it starts with these types of events, and like let's take it from whatever numbers that it is today and 10x it, and how do we go and make that happen? And I don't know what the answer to that is yet, but certainly. You guys have some ideas.
I'm positive that having you in on one of the keynotes there for DNN Summit will be a very good start for that. Have you agreed to that yet, or has anyone asked you, or am I the first to ask you?
You are the first to ask. If someone asks me, I'm happy to do it.
You're in
so let me know.
Will do. The email will be in your inbox by the end of the interview, I'm sure.
Mr. Sellers chat to be sure to call him.
Well, we'll finish our meeting at the end and talk a little bit about DNN Summit because it is starting to heat up, all of the planning and things around it. So we'll come back to that in a bit. talking about this idea of hearing, you hearing from the community and wanting to engage, how about the other direction around? If folks want to hear from you or watch what you're talking about or see what you're interested in and reading, what do you participate in? Are you on Twitter? Are you on Facebook? Are you in certain groups in LinkedIn? How can folks follow you and learn a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah. No. So certainly, I'm on Twitter, and I do that. And we're going to be publishing more blogs on our side here too. I think that the team does a pretty good job of driving some content out there, but I believe that as part of that excitement strategy, you have to be generating real, relevant content to a variety of people that perhaps have never heard of DNN or .NET Nuke. And I think that relevant content is something that guys like HubSpot actually do a pretty good job on. So we're actually going to be staffing up our marketing team a whole lot more than it is today, so we can get that content out there. But I'd love for you guys also to to be a part of that, and let's get this contributor system going. But then also just like on different ideas that you guys may have on things that we should write about, because we're going to be increasing that quite a bit. And then I'm happy to write as much as possible too. I think that we have better content experts maybe than me, but I'm always happy to chip in.
All right. David, as I'm starting to get to another couple of questions that I have in a thread, do we have any chat questions that have come in? Go ahead and start pulling those up if you have them.
There was a couple of things that are already on the list that we should be okay with there.
Okay. All right.
We're continuing to monitor that, though.
All right, all right. So, kind of jumping back to some of the earlier questions that the conversation led us through, but circling back because they're important. You said that you looked at some other systems before as you were investigating DNN as the choice. How about content management systems that you've worked within yourself? You have experience and you've played with and worked within DNN before. You were within Joomla, Drupal, other types of things and other platforms. Umbraco, Sitecore, anything on the .NET side. What experiences have you had, and how do you feel they're going to help shape some of the things that you're looking to accomplish?
Sure. Yeah, I had not worked with DNN previously, but certainly some of the other CMSs, as well as I would say the pre-CMS space, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you think of the a lot of the free, easy-to-use stuff today that you see kind of growing from the far left-hand side, the Squarespaces of the world, and maybe even the low end of the WordPresses of the world and what have you. So with all of my previous companies, we would kind of use those, but knowing that they were insufficient. Like I look at my crossover website today, and it's terrible. We're not using it for content management at all, and we need to, and we're actually going to be converting it, of course, to DNN.
Thank you. I was going to ask. I was going to say we have a good suggestion we could make for you. Well done. Drink your own Kool-Aid.
Right? And we've grown. I mean, when you're a startup, right? I mean, you're just concentrating on getting your product out there, and you basically a lot of times your website is just a glorified brochure.
Right.
And in this day and age, it's just that's not sufficient. And certainly when you grow to a certain size, that's no longer sufficient. So you have to add in some of the intelligence. You really need to know, engaging with. You need to be thinking about the entire funnel. How do you engage the top end of the funnel as well as the bottom end of the funnel and what have you, and that all kind of gets driven through your CMS. So that is something that I'm going to be using more, certainly across my companies. But I think that there's there's tons of people like me that know that level of sophistication is needed, but feel like it's too hard today. Right. So again, kind of getting back to that simplicity side of it. I think that prior to being part of the DNN world, I probably would have lived with my crossover site for some time, right? I'm like, too hard. We got so many other things, too hard, right? So how do we make it so that all those folks out there can just be like, you know what, click this one button and we can add tons of sophistication to you, and here's what you get out of it. And so I have to be A, aware of it, as a decision maker within these companies, but then B, it's got to be, so easy, or it's got to be a great partner network that can help me, et cetera, et cetera. So all these things, I think, go hand in hand.
Yeah. With that choosing of DNN, one of the questions that came in was kind of circling back to that of, why did you choose DNN? What did you see? And you've kind of answered before that there was, some potential for growth and that establishment. But, what did you see in DNN that made you choose it? And is that comparison of some of these other systems that you've seen where people want it to be easy, was that part of it?
Yeah. So, I guess kind of three things, right? One is, I like the community, like I mentioned previously. I think that that's a huge asset that many other companies just simply don't have, and I think that is great. I think two, I did like I think when you look at the spectrum of the solutions that are out there, I put DNN into the one click into the easier to use section, particularly on the core use cases, that really matter to folks. I think that there's several features in there that are perhaps not quite as easy to use, but I view it as slightly easier than what's out there, and I think that we can keep going with that, and I think that that's going to be part of the engineering challenge to do that. But then three, I did like the Microsoft space, and I don't know if I'm contrarian, maybe not to this group, but I do believe I think Satya, I think those guys are doing great. I think that Azure is going to continue to grow. I believe that Microsoft has done a fabulous job of making a transition away from just selling heavy duty OSs into boxes. Right, so I think that is an opportunity. So you wrap all three of them together, and then obviously a great team that we have here, and I think that there's lots of things that we can go do.
Well, about that Microsoft space, I might ask kind of one of the harder questions here. You might not have a good answer, or we're working on it is possibly a good answer. But a lot of the technical critique of the state of DNN now is that we are tied to an older model, and .NET Core, ASP.NET 2, going to other types of things that are more closer to what Microsoft is doing now has been a big part of the conversation and the buzz. So, while we're here to talk with you and get to know you a little bit and hear where you might be taking us, that's one of the big questions that's being asked, and I realize it's a hard one to answer now because you might just be researching and thinking about it, but are there already talk and plans about .NET Core, changing what we're on, moving to something that's more be a way to help invigorate?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. It's certainly something that we have to talk about a bit more. Obviously, adoption of Azure and cloud and making that as easy as possible is got to be a key part of the roadmap as a whole, right? There's no world where cloud doesn't continue to grow exponentially. And, obviously AWS has been able to do that as a leader, but certainly you look at the growth that Microsoft has had with Azure, it's been spectacular and gaining. So of course, everything that can help embrace that, I think, is really good. Now, I don't, however, look back and think that it's a liability, though. I actually believe that when you look at the number of developers that know, ASP.NET, if you look at the number of IT shops that feel comfortable using that technology set and the extensibility, I think that is an asset. And it's going to be a long time from now where all of that is no longer relevant to the CIO and the rest of those IT guys. So we're not going to shy away from it. And I think that there's always two ways to look at what people consider legacy. And I don't view legacy in that same way. Right? I view it as an asset because you have this huge base of knowledge, and you have tried and true solutions. And I think that's great, and there's no reason why we would have to throw that out.
Will there be more Azure-wise? You've mentioned a couple of times with that as a focus. Will Azure Service become part of the .NET DNN Corp?
I believe that we have to look at everything Azure and figure out how we embrace that. I know that there's a bunch of folks that, do the on-prem solutions and what have you, and we'll, of course, always have to balance that. But, when you extrapolate forward this business, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, there's no world that, that the cloud services aren't the volume. So, and those exponential growth curves are only going to continue. So I think we have to be out in front of that, and I think that we have to be leaders in that. And I think that we have to embrace the various, OS and the cloud type of functionality that they're actually bringing in there, because that they're trying to go and invest more and more there, being an OS company. So I believe that we do have to take a look at it, and I think that we have to embrace it. And we haven't gone through the analysis of how that hits the various pieces of the roadmap and things like that yet. But in general, without a doubt, I think that we have to embrace all things there.
Well, we're moving into. Yeah, go ahead, Joe, please.
Follow up a little bit on that, Ryan. So you and I were talking about this before as it relates to the other organizations that you run today, right? So like Crossover and Wright Austin and Engine Yard,
yep.
Right? So those are all cloud-based,
yep.
Right? Even your work philosophy is cloud-based.
Yep. Everything. Yep.
So, I think all of that sort of combines in that same philosophy around the cloud.
100% agree.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to extend here. We're wrapping into our last 10 minutes, and I was going to extend questions over to you. Joe, you've been in the room and kind of quiet. Did you have any other items you wanted to chime in on that we've addressed earlier, or any other comments you wanted to add in?
Yeah, and I think one of the ones that I thought was interesting earlier that someone had asked, was around the balance between what we're doing on Evoke and what we're doing on platform. And, people are obviously concerned you're making investments in platform. How do you get your return on that? Right? And how do you justify that?
Yeah, so I believe that we need to take a look at that in general and shift as much as possible actually into into the open source platform itself. There's obviously some monetization strategies that we'll have to work through and things like that. But I err towards checking more stuff in and having more contributors than I do kind of trying to keep everything in a closet per se. Now that won't be everything perhaps, but when it comes to it, I think it's what we're pitching to customers is a holistic discussion. It's not choose Evoke over a platform, and it's hey, you are choosing to be in this ecosystem as a whole, right. and we have this this thing that we built, and then we've got all these other players that we bring along with it, and that's the part of the value. So I do err towards. I would even I'm up in British Columbia tomorrow, and I'm going to sit down with Ash and be like, great. So what can we check in? Right? What isn't part of it today, and what do we just go and go do that? So.
All right. So the other thing we talked a lot about here, and you and I have had some discussions, Andy, is so the word community is used a lot, and I think your view of community is maybe a little bit different than how the open source part of community is. Can you talk a little bit about how community
Sure.
and ISVs and ecosystem and sort of...
Yeah, so I should clarify that. So my view of community is that holistic picture, right? I think that it is the open source community. I believe that it is other ISV partners out there that will plug seamlessly into DNN. I believe that it is a reseller community. I believe that it is a support community. All of that go together, and I guess I take more of a customer view of that, right? It's like that is all part of the ecosystem. And I think that we need to do a better job of building each one of those categories. And I'd love to even see metrics around all that, right? Is how many partners do we have, and how many ISVs do we have plugging in seamlessly into the platform and what have you.
Right. And when we talk about partners in that sense, we're not necessarily, or you're not necessarily talking about who's in our Evoke partner channel today, right? You're talking about partners writ large,
yep.
Right?
Module developers, people building extensions, everyone.
Yep, exactly right, exactly right. So, and then how do we make that flourish, right? Because those guys, building modules and things like that, they have to have a good storefront to be able to go and connect to customers. The partners have to be able to, we have to be able to pull partners into the support model and things like that. So yeah, it's the holistic view, and I'd love to have that discussion with you guys on the bridge as a whole. It's like, great, what areas are we strong? What areas are we weak? What areas were we strong before? How do we bring that back, et cetera, et cetera.
So one of the areas, and I know some of this is still early discussions, is about one of the questions, and I meant to get this back on the monetization question, was around different things that we can offer to community that may not be things that are offered for free, but things that are offered that community has been asking for a long time, right? Because community says, well, we can't pay $8,000 for a license, or we can't pay whatever the ADS is for this high-end thing.
Yep.
But is there something that we
middle
plan
ground,
or that are sort of like middle ground to offer community to give them that little value add?
Yeah, I think that we've got to look at the, as a whole there, right? Going from 0 to 8,000 that's usually that's a big step.
Yeah.
So I think we do have to kind of take a look at that holistically, but this is where listening matters, right? Well, I'd love to get that list of requests from the broader community as a whole, and we can even sub-segment underneath that and say, great, what are the key areas that we should collectively go work on, and then let's track them, and then let's make decisions on them, because some of them it could be, unfortunately that's not going to happen anytime soon,
right.
Or some of them could be, there are some things that we can go do together quickly, but it starts with that list and tracking it and holding each other accountable, right? Because it's not all things that we're going to do; it's things that we do together. So
right, and I think that was my takeaway from the conversations you and I have had to this point, is about building that collaboration between us and community, right? It's not a one way. Hey, these are the things we're going to do, and you guys can follow along if you want.
That's exactly right.
More about doing it together.
Yep, exactly right.
Or a month.
We're conscious of the fact that we've gone through an hour here. We've been, thrilled to have you with us, but we wanted to be respectful of your time here. Thank you for coming to join us here, Andy, and Joe for joining us here for an hour. We're going to start wrapping up the interview here, but I want to ask a couple of questions. Andy, do you have any questions for us? You kind of described a few things about wanting to ask questions in the future, wanting to connect, but here right now, you have 2 questions that you haven't asked yet, and you want to ask somebody?
Yeah, I guess what I'd like to just understand is how do we best engage and get those lists together of things that we should be doing together. Community is a big word, and there's a lot of people, and I guess how do we pull together and understand what the priority list needs to be? And I don't know that I have a good grasp of that yet. So I guess maybe that's a question to y'all on, like, what is the best way to engage, you think, and kind of come up with that priority list of things that we should go work together?
I respect that idea and question coming back. We've been discussing it ourselves as the user group when we're talking with people about how, if there's change brewing and there are things happening, how can we step up to help direct some of that change? If the DNN community has been guilty in the past of, finding features or finding elements rolled out in Evoke or in the professional edition that then get rolled down a few years later down to community edition, and we throw up our hands and we say, who asked for this feature? This isn't a burning feature that anyone needs, but there are these 3 over here that everyone's desperate for, and there isn't a good fix for yet. We've been discussing that we want to bring those ideas back up, especially if open source is being increased. And like you said, checking in and having more participants in that. How can we help organize that and participate in those discussions? So I think, like you're saying, over the next several months, we'd like to come up with that decision, whether that's new websites where we post ideas, whether it's existing DNN modules like the Answers module, where we're posting ideas, concepts, and upvoting the ones we want to see worked on next. Several different ways. David, you were going to pitch in.
I had a couple of things that just came to mind, like right away whenever you asked that question, Andy, and that's we obviously have these community events that are put together. So those are pretty obvious places where moderated forums could probably happen there, and discussions or roundtables there. Another thing is, and Peter Docker put this in chat as well. It was one of my ideas at the beginning, is to maybe think about reinstantiating the core team again. There used to be a core team of developers, for DNN, the community, and that's maybe one idea to take some of the leaders in that area and really kind of be a hyper-focused group like it used to be a long time ago.
Yeah.
It was really great. And those are. And then also, like these meetups, we'd love to have you back maybe in a month or two and and have another conversation, maybe a little bit deeper once you get acclimated.
So maybe we give it here to the end of the year, maybe November or December. You up for coming out to see us again, spend some time with us, and going through another round?
Yeah, no, certainly happy to. And then, but I guess. I do want to get to the bottom of that, and like, what is the best way? Like, let's make those categories, right? Because sometimes it's going to be, engineering related items, such as certain bug fixes and features. Sometimes it's going to be, how do we grow the ecosystem as a whole? What ISVs do we want to go target? I mean, there's some categories of different areas of feedback that we want to get the priority list on, and I guess I'm going to be leaning on Joe here to work with you all to go and do that. But I do want to, it's not a hey, let's get to it at some point in the distant future. It's going to be a no, let's get that list down and let's write it down. Let's all agree, in some type of priority, and then let's figure out how we're either going to do them or we're not going to do them. But let's truly do get that list down, and I think that's the only way that it's really going to advance. So
I think if there are structured ways for one to participate, from developers and even non-developers, from a thinking big picture kind of standpoint, to get involved and help, if not shape where that goes, just be a participant in the direction, then I think you have 60 folks here online and more that are ready to jump in and do those things. And from the community side, I can attest that we're very excited about doing this and stepping up in all the ways possible.
Great. Well, I certainly appreciate the time. I know that I'm new to this community as a whole, but I'm super excited. And you certainly have my commitment that we will be investing on our side to go and rejuvenate it and to bring it all together and understand the priorities. And you can hold us accountable. And I'm happy to come back whenever, but let's go through that checklist. And I'm certainly happy to chat about it at the various events too, because this is an important part of the strategy. It's an important part of the history of .NET Nuke and DNN as a whole. And I think it's important to nurture that and to grow it again. And there's no reason in my mind. There's nothing that has structurally changed with the end customers that makes the demand less for some reason. The demand is more than ever. There's no reason in my mind that the DNN community can't be even a bigger part of that than it is today.
I think that's the best quote for the meeting. We will have that as our bumper for the meeting.
All right.
Well, Andy Tryba, welcome to DNN Corporate. Welcome to the DNN community. We're looking forward to having you participate. Thank you for spending time with us here today.
Great. Thank you very much.
I'm going to switch off a video here and spend just a couple of moments, if I can switch over to share content. I'm not sure I'm going to do that well. David, what I'm intending to do here is pass over to you to talk just a moment about the DNN Summit. The DNN Summit is our next upcoming community event, and we want to talk about that for just a moment.
And the email to Andy is in his inbox, inviting him to be keynote.
All right.
All right, awesome. Yeah, so DNN Summit is scheduled again for Denver, Colorado, in February the 6th through the 10th. One key difference in this year's event is the extra day of the sessions. So it'll be 2 full days of sessions. You'll have the training day, 2 full days of sessions, and then we'll have the after social events as well on that. And registration is open, so you can go to dnnsummit.org and check it out there and go through the registration process. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody there. Having an event bigger than last year would be great.
Mitch put in a note that by the time we have our next Southern Fried meeting, which is going to be the 21st of next month, they will have the speaker announcements out. So we'll be able to talk a little bit about the sessions that have been chosen. Myself, I'm helping organize the training sessions, so I'll speak about those just a little bit at our next user group meeting. But if we don't have Mitch on, we'll at least have David on to talk about the different sessions that we see, pick out some of our favorites to look to. But then as we get into November and December, we'll be sure to have some more concentrated information about DNN Summit. If you haven't already registered, our registration is open. And if you haven't already started making travel plans, just from experience last time, it does not pay to wait and make your travel arrangements. You might not have them go up in price dramatically, but you more than likely will. So there is no late fare here that is any cheaper. Go ahead and get early as you can is my personal recommendation. All right, so that concludes our special session here of the Southern Fried DNN User Group here for the end of August. Thank you very much, Andy Tryba and Joe Brinkman from DNN Corp for joining us. Thank you everybody who was online. Again, that plug there is come join us. 21st of next month is our next meeting. We'll announce shortly who we have speaking. And remember, the 3rd Thursday of every month is our usual meeting dates. We are changing up a little bit of our content and our structure, and so please stay tuned. We'd love to have your questions. We're going to be answering questions and doing training and tutorials as part of meetings. We're going to be doing obviously more interviews, but as well connecting with some more of the folks across the pond in EU and Australia. We had Nina here last month, or really this month, and we're going to be doing that more often. So stay tuned to see some more folks that you might not have heard of in this format. And thank you very much, and good night, everyone.